Chapter 9. The Ladies of the Deadwoods. The Deadwoods was surrounded by a towering, dense thicket of deep red rose bushes. It was so tall, all James could see was the solarium at the highest point of the mansion, shining as if in sunlight even though it was now dark. He had heard the thicket was dead, dried, and thorny, but the roses were blooming with life, and the deepest, most beautiful shade of red he had ever beheld. It looked nothing like the dead place skylights had described, and he didn't understand why it was called the Dead Woods. "This can't be right. There is no entrance," said James. "We're in the right place, sir," said the driver, looking frightened. His eyes darted around as if he expected something sinister to pop out of the bushes. James had to wonder if he had made a mistake coming to this place. The hilarity of the cake aside, the tales he'd heard about these witches were starting to unnerve him. Just when he started to assure himself he was probably overreacting, a red swirling vortex appeared in the thicket right before them, creating an opening, and standing there in the center of swirling red flames was the most luminescent woman James had ever seen. Her hair was long and light golden, and it shone with a light that seemed to be coming from within. She wore a long silver dress, and on her collarbone rested a silver pendant depicting the 3 phases of the moon. She looked as if she wasn't of this world, and then he remembered he was no longer in his own world. So to call this woman otherworldly was simply stating a fact, and perhaps wasn't as remarkable as it seemed in that moment. Though James had a feeling, even by this world's standards, this woman would be remarkable. "Hello, James. I am Circe, the queen of this land. You are most welcome here," she said, instantly putting him at ease as she motioned to have him enter through the magical vortex. "Please, come in. I will send someone out to fetch the cake," she said, laughing at the size of it as James got out of his carriage. James hesitated before walking through the vortex. He had heard so many stories about the women of the Deadwoods, and even though he had encountered things he thought he never would in this lifetime, he was still awed by the magic of this place. "This way. I assure you it's safe." Circe walked him through what might have been the most beautiful grounds he had ever seen. In the center of the courtyard was a fountain with a statue of a gorgon surrounded by dancing nymphs. This didn't look like a dead place to him. It was lush and full of the same beautiful golden flowers he had seen along his way. They sparkled like sunlight, casting a magical glow on the massive stone mansion that was adorned with statues of gargoyles, dragons, and harpies. The mansion itself was strange. To James, it looked as though the solarium was an addition to the stone section of the building, which looked ancient and foreboding, while the glass-domed solarium seemed to shine with hope and love, almost as if the person who had built it meant to transform this place into something quite different from its original owner's intentions. James loved old architecture, but this was more ancient than any he had ever seen, and he was intrigued that the stone creatures that were residing on almost every available perch seemed alive. He knew they were simply carvings, but he felt something stirring within their stone visages. Maybe his imagination was simply running away from it with itself, but he could see deep cracks where it looked like the creatures had dislodged themselves, only to return to the resting place. But even with these eerie stone creatures, he thought this was a beautiful place, with its shining glass dome and a garden of flowers that looked as if they were lit by the sun even in the black of night. "You're very observant, James. This used to be a dreary place, full of sorrow, never touched by the sun. It is still where the dead dwell, but it needn't be shrouded in shadow and fear. It needn't be a dead place," said Circe, leading him to the large mansion, where 2 women were waiting to greet him. "Are you a mind reader as well as a witch?" asked James, taking in the majesty of the women before him. It seems to me much has changed since Blackbeard visited this place. It's not all at all what I expected. Cersei smiled. Indeed, much has changed since he was here. Just then the two other women joined them. As he stood there looking at the three women before him, he didn't understand why Blackbeard was so fearful of them. Why anyone was for that matter. These witches, if that's what they truly were not hideous. They didn't even look alike as Blackbeard had described. These are my aunts, Primrose and Hazel. They rule by my side here in the Deadwoods, and they also might read minds. She winked at James, disarming him completely. Hazel had gray eyes, silver hair, and alabaster skin, and Primrose had plump apple cheeks with a smattering of freckles and ginger hair. These women were truly enchanting. James was no stranger to royalty. His father was a duke, his mother a duchess, and he was heir to his father's title and ancestral home. He had even dined in the palace, and he was never overawed by any of it growing up. But being in the presence of these women, these queens, was something else entirely. For the first time, he was unable to come up with the right words and found himself fumbling. I was made to understand that you were three identical sisters with raven hair and stark white frightful faces. He was surprised he was so forthright, but he was relieved when the ladies laughed. You mistake us for my mothers, said Cersei. She had the most serene smile, and James could detect no malice within her. He was usually quite sharp at taking the measure of the people he met, and he could always tell their true nature even behind their sweet smiles and polite words. And with this woman, he saw only goodness. My apologies, Queen Cersei. I had no idea, said James. He felt more nervous than he had ever been in royal company back at home. No need to apologize, James. My mothers have been described in far worse terms than those, Cersei said with the most gracious smile. James was enchanted by these women, and for the first time he understood the true meaning of being bewitched. He was under their spell. Please, James, we have been expecting you. Let's go inside, said Hazel. Yes, and let's have some of that delicious cake you brought with you, Primrose added. A monstrous yet dignified wraith of a man directed the cart that was carrying the cake into the courtyard. James couldn't take his eyes off this man. When he took a closer look, he realized he was not much more than a skeleton with some leathery skin stretched over his bones. Yet somehow, this man, or what used to be a man, was sparkling with life, intelligence, and even kindness. That, James, is our grandfather, Sir Jacob. And you are right, he is a very kind man, said Cersei, smiling. James couldn't help but be dazzled by these women. They all seemed to be glowing like the golden flowers that filled their courtyard. And somehow, living among the dead seemed perfectly natural to them. These were puzzling women. It's a pleasure to meet you, Sir Jacob, said James, not taking his eyes from the beguiling women. What are those enchanting flowers? I've seen them all over the many kingdoms, he asked, as they brought him through the vestibule, which was filled with wondrous carvings of all manner of frightening creatures. The flowers were once very rare in these lands, cultivated and hoarded by the queens before us. But we are in a new age now, one in which the queens of the dead share their magic, said Cersei, taking Primrose's and Hazel's hands. Are they the same flowers that have gifted Queen Tulip her immortality and made Mrs. Tittlebottom young again? He asked. Hazel turned back and gave James a look. We knew you were very intelligent, but I didn't imagine you would also be so intuitive. You impress me, James. Thank you, my lady. It seems strange to me that the people here still fear Queen Cersei's mothers. You speak of another age. How long has it been since the Odd Sisters have passed away? Asked James, wishing skylights had told him more about the Deadwoods. They have been so long away, they would not recognize the many kingdoms. So many things have changed since the breaking of the worlds, Circe said. My mothers have not passed away. They are neither living nor dead. They are in a place between worlds, where they can no longer do harm to others or themselves. I fear those in the many kingdoms remember their terror all too well, and fear them as if they were still among us. Mrs. Tittlebottom seemed rather alarmed that they sent me on a quest to find them a cake. She said she would be paying you a visit. Circe sighed. She has reasons to fear their return to the many kingdoms. If they were to come back to the land of the living, all would be chaos and destruction. I will write Mrs. Tittlebottom and assure her she needn't worry, said Circe, frowning. Even though it has been an age since my mothers were locked away in the palace between, there are those who still remember their reign of terror and fear their return. Let's not bore James with our history, Circe, said Primrose, with her cheeky smile that made creases at the sides of her small nose. Queen Circe is not boring me at all, Lady Primrose. I find it most interesting, he said, wondering what Circe meant by breaking of the worlds. I mean just that, said Circe. Long ago, there was a fourth odd sister, and she was cherished by my mothers. They doted upon her and loved her more than they loved themselves. But one terrible day, the Dark Fairy, in a fit of rage over her mistreatment of the other fairies, set the fairylands ablaze, killing their sister by mistake. So desperate were my mothers to have their sister back again, they devised a spell to create a new sister by sacrificing the best part of themselves. But in doing so, what they created was a daughter in the image of their dead sister. That spell took away the better part of their natures. Everything that was good within them now belongs to their daughter. And in time, the odd sister's sacrifice caused them to go mad, leading them to cause heartbreak and destruction in the many corners of the worlds. And I am that daughter. James didn't know what to say. Again, he felt as if he were living in a dream. Nothing that had happened since he dived off Blackbeard's ship to save him seemed real. And Circe was forced to sacrifice herself so our mothers could be whole again, Hazel said. But her mothers wouldn't allow it. With the help of a god, they forced Circe from the place between, causing the worlds to break, and once again, shattering themselves beyond repair. So now Circe is here, after repairing the worlds, and seeing to the damage her mothers have done, while her mothers are trapped in the place between. And that is why the many kingdoms is covered in those magical flowers? You use their magic to repair the worlds? Yes, that is one of the many forms of magic we used. There is far more to the story, of course, but we are not here to discuss our past, said Circe, losing herself in another place in time. James wondered what other ordeals these women had gone through. He could see their pain as clearly as he saw their kindness. But he was a gentleman and wouldn't press them for more than they were willing to share. That is very kind of you, James. I can see now why my mothers have been so eager for us to meet the man who broke Blackbeard's curse, said Circe. James still didn't understand how the Odd Sisters had sent him the message to bring a cake they couldn't even eat. Unless, of course, it was just a way to torment and frighten those who feared them, like poor Mrs. Tittlebottom. And it was beyond him how Circe knew her mothers were eager to meet him. Come along, James. Let's make our way inside. We will be happy to answer all your questions. But we will be more comfortable in the solarium, said Primrose. As they walked through the mansion, James marveled at the statues and carvings on the walls. This is what he expected when he thought of a place called the Deadwoods. He paused remarkably, studying rooms with carved dragons, and a library with stone crows perched on its shelves, and a room that looked like a nursery with a large stone bird's nest surrounded by ravens. Yes, this part of the house was built by the queens who came before us, some of them odious and shrouded in death and misery. We decided to leave this part of our home as it was to remind us to never walk the paths of those earlier queens, said Hazel. Their ascent to the tallest point of the mansion seemed endless until finally they reached the solarium, a room constructed completely out of glass with a magnificent view of the Deadwoods. For as far as James could see were innumerable tombs and headstones on a blanket of glittering, glowing golden flowers. This is truly a beautiful room, said James. Thank you. Our sister Gothel had it built for us, said Hazel, and he could see she became lost in those words, drifting from that time to this one like a wraith lost in the mist. You're a very interesting mortal, James. You see things others do not, said Hazel. We wonder if you wouldn't be happier in the many kingdoms. She smiled serenely. We'd be more than happy to host you here in the Dead Woods, said Primrose. It seems to me you belong here. James redirected his gaze at the cemetery below them. He was having a hard time understanding how these beguiling women could live there, surrounded by so much death, and he wondered if that wasn't the reason for the sadness that seemed to pass over them like dark clouds, dimming their light. We are the reigning queens of the dead. This is our home, said Primrose, smiling. It's true. Sadness clings to us like the mist, which sometimes threatens to pull us under its perpetual despair. But it's not sadness for the world as it is now. It is sadness for what it once was, and will be again if we are not vigilant. Hazel looked as if she were stuck somewhere between this world and the one she feared. It is our duty to keep and protect this land, and to make sure it never falls into the hands of my mothers again. They would see this become a place of terror and nightmares, and have their power felt in all the worlds, including yours, James, and even in your beloved Neverland. Cersei's words sent a deep, penetrating fear into James's heart. But don't let that frighten you. We are nothing like our mothers and sisters before us. Primrose said, motioning to a table with a line of portraits of women in oval frames, and there he saw them, the odd sisters, the identical witches. Their faces seemed to stare from their place of honor among the portraits of what he assumed were the many queens that had come before them. That's right, James. This is where we honor the queens of the Deadwoods, said Cersei, reading his mind again and making him flinch. As much as he liked these women, he couldn't get used to them reading his mind, though somehow he could tell they were trying their best not to be intrusive. I don't understand. It seems to me your mother's powers are already felt in all the worlds. How else were they able to invite me here? And why on earth did they ask me to bring them a cake? He asked, unable to look away from the endless graves below that surrounded the mansion, or the skeletal creatures below helping Sir Jacob bring the massive cake inside. These creatures didn't seem to be imbued with the same spirit Sir Jacob possessed. They were different, unspeaking, and lacking that spark of life James felt in their leader. My mothers are in possession of Opal, the dark fairy's cherished crow. She is now their minion, and she dwells in the space between. But unlike my mother, she is free to travel between the worlds. They are able to send messages with her, and speak to us through a magic mirror I gave them, if only to save poor Opal from flying back and forth between the worlds with their many messages. She laughed, but James could tell her laugh was wry, and that Cersei was beyond what he would consider heartbroken. It seems to me your mothers like to trifle with the lives of others, simply for the pleasure of doing so, he said. Asking me to get them a cake, knowing full well where I would have to procure it, and knowing the terror it would cause. It's mean-spirited. This made the ladies laugh, and to James it seemed they hadn't laughed so much in quite a while. Primrose was laughing so hard she was wiping tears from her cheeks. Mean spirit. That's sweet. Even Hazel, the most stoic of the three, was overcome by fits of laughter. Yes, James, you're right. They are mean-spirited, but that is the least of their crimes. Well, whatever their reason for bringing me here, I am honored and privileged to have met you fine ladies. Honestly, we doubted you would ever come. It's been so many years since Blackbeard visited the Dead Woods, long before you were born. But the Odd Sisters always insisted you would come to us once Blackbeard finally gifted you the Jolly Roger, said Circe. That's impossible. Blackbeard couldn't have been more than 20 years older than me, said James. My mother's cursed Blackbeard with the inability to rest neither in life nor with the release of death. It was his punishment for taking their treasures. James was horrified. What do you mean? He lived an extraordinarily long life, James, one in which he wasn't permitted to sleep, and no matter how mortally wounded he was, he could not die. I hope now he is finally at rest, said Circe. Oh, I hope so too, said Primrose. He seemed to be longing for release whenever we looked in on him. I do hope he is finally at peace. James wondered how it was Primrose was able to look in on him. One of the treasures Blackbeard took from the Odd Sisters was one of their many magic mirrors. Those in possession of the mirrors can see and communicate with each other if they wish. That is also how the Odd Sisters communicate with us. James was feeling the loss of Blackbeard even more profoundly in that moment than the day he had left him in the floating boneyard. Though now he had a better understanding of why he was ready to take his leave of the world, he had no idea Blackbeard had been under so much torment. Though James had never encountered it firsthand, he understood now why Blackbeard was known for his bad temper and cutthroat ways. He must have suffered incomprehensible anguish. It's no wonder he was so eager for James to tell the Odd Sisters he had finally given the Jolly Roger to someone who had saved his life. Why he was so eager to break this curse that had been tormenting him for so long. Maybe I'm just unclear how magic works. But why make Blackbeard send me all the way here? Wouldn't he have released himself from the curse by fulfilling his end of the bargain? Some witches work that way, but the Odd Sisters wanted you to come here for some reason. That is why they made that part of Blackbeard's payment. James could see Circe was still trying to work this out for herself, that she too was often confused by her own mother's behavior. Well, whatever their reason, James was happy to be in the company of these women, even if he did miss Blackbeard terribly, and even more so now that he knew what the pirate had endured. I'm sorry you missed your friend, James. I know he sent you here in hopes of finding Neverland, but I fear you won't find the life you are looking for there. I'm sorry to say it won't be as you remember it, said Primrose. How do you know this? I see a terrible fate for you if you go to Neverland. It was written in our souls as is written in the book of fairy tales, said Hazel. Won't you write a story of your own, James? Won't you make a life for yourself here, rather than take the path the Odd Sisters have predetermined for you? Her serene smile did nothing to hide the sorrow in her heart. There was a part of James that felt very at home in the Deadwoods. He couldn't explain it. He liked these women, and he liked these lands. They were probably even more fascinating than his beloved Neverland. But he felt a panic surge through him, as if he were being taken off course by a terrible storm, the sort he had read about in the Norse sagas, the type of storm that carried you away from your dreams. So much of what had happened after the battle with the Kraken seemed unreal to him, and James wondered if all of this was all some sort of trick. He had read stories of gruesome witches disguising themselves as beautiful enchantresses to gain the trust of their victims before they had betrayed them, and he was starting to fear he had fallen into a similar trap. He certainly felt as if he was taken off course and thrust into a world that didn't seem real. I don't believe you, he said, standing up. It's all written in the book of fairy tales, James. Your fate was written long ago, but I do believe we can help you to change it. How do you know what is written within its pages if it's been locked away in Blackbeard's chest? He asked. James, calm now. We are not my mothers in disguise, and we are not deceiving you, said Circe. The queens of the dead have been the authors of the book of fairy tales since the first queen wrote it in its pages. It is inscribed on our souls. Time means nothing where the dead dwell. You have seen with your own eyes how we drift in and out of time, how we experience the past and future as if it is happening now, because, dear James, it is. All time is one. We tether ourselves to this timeline because this is where we are needed most. You have nothing to fear from us, James, but we would have our book back, said Hazel, smiling at him. I admit I had hoped to tempt your mothers with it in exchange for passage to Neverland, he said. Are you willing to do the same? Will you show me the way if I give you the book? He asked, sitting back down. You need no such bargaining. Neverland is exactly where they want you. Going there sets you on the path they predestined for you. You're lucky you're dealing with us, James, and not the Odd Sisters. They would manipulate you and send you down the road of ruin and despair, even if they had a mind to help you, said Primrose. I am quite adept at avoiding manipulative mothers, said James, making Primrose laugh. So you are. We will help you find Neverland, James, if you're determined to go. Circe is bound to grant you your wish as part of the pact her mother's made with Blackbeard. But we can't send you off to Neverland without a warning that we see terrible things for you there. The life you seek isn't in Neverland. This is nonsense. I don't believe you. I have wanted nothing more in my entire life. It is my fondest wish. Are you sure that is your fondest wish, James? Asked Circe, eyeing him. She saw there was a secret wish in his heart he was not sharing with them. Because all you will acquire in Neverland is your pirate's name and disillusionment. Your losses will be greater than you can fathom. Surely one's fate isn't written? Don't I have the power to direct my own life? I can't believe we can't choose for ourselves. Didn't I change Blackbeard's fate by saving him from the Kraken? Didn't he change mine by defeating the captain of the Flying Dutchman? James's words seemed to cause Circe pain. She closed her eyes and composed herself before she replied. You do have the power to direct your own fate, James. That is what we're trying to tell you. Right now, you're on my mother's path, and very few who have walked the path the Odd Sisters have laid out for them survived to tell their tale. James, did you not hear the voices of the Odd Sisters on the winds when you faced the dreaded queen? Did you not see their face in the sea creature, or feel their power when Blackbeard used their tinderbox? Everything that's happened since you fell out of your prom has been by their design. Don't you see what you're dealing with, James? I refuse to believe this. I will not accept that the Odd Sisters have been ushering me along my entire life. Toward aim? What aim? You say the stories are written on your soul. Then tell me, why do they want me in Neverland so desperately? I fear if I share your fate, you just think it gave you the power to avoid it, and it won't. The moment you arrive in Neverland, you will be lost. If all time is one, as you say, and my story has been written, and is being written at the same time, then doesn't that prove I could change my fate? Won't you please just show me the way to Neverland? James admired the ladies of the Deadwoods, but he was starting to wonder if he should just take this up with the Odd Sisters. Hazel narrowed her eyes at him, hearing his thoughts. Do not think of dealing with the Odd Sisters, James. They can also see into your heart and wish to exploit it. We want to help you. We know your greatest wish, your secret wish, but we cannot make it come to pass. It is not within our power. But we can offer you a better life here, and if you refuse and insist on going to Neverland despite our warnings, then we will give you the magic you need to get there. The rest is up to you. You've heard our warnings. Will you not heed them? Asked Hazel. A wind swept into the room through the open windows, bringing with it a cascade of voices that spoke as one. It extinguished the candles, leaving them in darkness except for the glowing flower petals that were brought in on the breeze. He will spend his days in regret if he doesn't follow his dreams. He has spent his life longing to return to Neverland. It's all he's ever wanted. His heart is consumed by it. Let us not forget what happens to those who do not fulfill their destinies. The voice on the wind seemed to be coming from nowhere and everywhere at once, filling the room with its sound. But why must it be his destiny? Why can't he choose another path? Surely we changed ours, said Primrose, looking at the portraits of the queens that came before her. James realized it was the former queens of this place that were now speaking. Did you choose your fate, Primrose? Are you not now ruling the lands you wanted nothing more than to escape? James saw the light dim in Primrose's eyes, and her face crumbled into despair. He knew there was truth in the dead queen's voices, and he hoped they were right, and that his destiny was to be in Neverland. Nothing you say will sway him from his purpose. All you could do is warn him. The choice is his, said the voice that sounded like many speaking in perfect harmony. But the voices stopped as suddenly as they started, and the room felt as it had before they were visited by the spirits of the dead queens. Yes, James, that was the voice of our sisters, our mothers, and their mothers before them, speaking to us as one from beyond the veil. And they are right. We cannot keep you from going to Neverland if that is what you truly want. Primrose waved her hand at the pianoforte, making it play on its own and causing James to spin in its direction. But you will do one thing for us in return, she said, in a soft whisper, so the spirits of the previous queens of the dead could not hear her above the piano music. Give us the wooden box with the eye, the one Blackbeard gave you, she said with a sly smile that unnerved James. If I give you this box, you will send me to Neverland? He asked, lowering his voice. We will, and with heavy hearts, said Circe. Is there nothing we can say to change your mind, James? Nothing more we can offer you? Wouldn't you like to make a life for yourself here? Ours, too, is a magical land, and I have sensed that you feel at home here. You've seen so little of it, and already you hold it in high esteem, if for nothing else but its beauty. Imagine what you would make of it if you were to spend more time here. James could see that Circe meant it, but even this bewitching land couldn't sway him from his life's purpose. You're right. I am drawn to this world, and perhaps if I came here when I fell out of my prom so many years ago, I would have made it my mission to come back and live my days here in the splendor of you beguiling ladies of the dead. But don't you see, Queen Circe, how much I need to find Neverland again? That I am able to resist your tempting offer and give up living in such a place, which has intrigued me like no other, that it truly means I am meant for Neverland. Sometimes we mistake our wishes for our fate, James, said Hazel, but you are bound to grant me this wish. That is what I want. Though it breaks my heart to give you grief, then so be it. Bring us the box with the eye, and we will enchant your ship so it may fly to Neverland. We will meet you at Morningstar Harbor tomorrow evening and make the exchange then, said Hazel. Her tone was irritated and serious, and had a look of great sadness in her eyes. James could see all the women truly wished he would stay, but he couldn't bring himself to be distracted from finding Neverland. Well, I think it's time we had some cake, said Primrose, laughing, trying to lighten the mood of the room. Of the three, she was the most light-hearted, even though she too seemed burdened by time and duty, not to mention worry for the choice he had made. You are a very unusual mortal, James, said Circe. It's no wonder my mothers have had their eye on you. I wish you had never gotten their attention. I wonder then what you would have made of your life. Her words chilled a place in his heart that reminded him of seeing the candles underwater in the floating boneyard. But let's not dwell on the things we cannot change. The odd sisters did make you bring that magnificent cake all this way. We might as well enjoy it, said Primrose, making Circe and Hazel laugh with her. Just then, Sir Jacob and 4 skeletal creatures entered the room with the enormous cake. It was such an odd sight, the juxtaposition of it, these smiling women living amid monsters. They are not monsters, James, but men very much like you. More like you than you even realize. They are our responsibility and our family. Hazel put her hand out to one of the creatures as if to comfort it, making James feel instantly ashamed. Please excuse me, Lady Hazel, he said. There are so many things about this land I don't understand. I didn't mean offense. We are not offended, James. We know you have a good heart. We just wonder how much it will remain so, said Circe. We would only too happy to share all of our stories with you. We would sit with you and read the book of fairy tales. You could read about the Odd Sisters, how they came to be, about Sir Jacob, and the many queens of the Deadwoods. There are wondrous tales within its pages, even stories that involve their lands. You could read them all, if only you agreed to stay here with us, said Circe, her eyes sparkling with tears. Do not cry, dear Circe. Let us enjoy this beautiful cake before I depart and realize my dream. Who knows? Maybe my travels will bring me back here again, said James. He knew he would probably never return, but he very much liked the idea of seeing these women again. We do have one final request of you, James, Circe said, her expression suddenly serious. Do not open the box. The look she gave him transformed her face into something almost fierce. I have no reason to, my lady. Besides, Blackbeard already warned me not to, he said. Wonderful. Then let us eat this delightful-looking cake, said Primrose, and we will enjoy these last moments with you, and pretend as though you are not breaking our hearts.